I had a colleague who was completely type A, very high strung and complained about everything. The only time I ever saw him smile was at his retirement party. He looked truly happy about his long deserved break. A week after he quit he was sipping Mate's on the beach and dropped dead of a heart attack. I'm sorry to hear that. Makes you wonder when we think we can catch a break and what we are all actually working so hard for. At a place I used to work, 2 women came to work over Labor Day weekend to catch up on some things. They were raped and murdered by the weekend janitor. Had 2 other coworkers who died of cancer. Killings happened in the early 80s. You don't have to worry about him growing old. He was apparently shot and killed by a Gordon 1994. Last year, I don't even remember what month, because it was all a blur, one of my early 60s coworkers passed. The first time something seemed unusual was, he couldn't remember the password to log into his computer, and we had just reset it the day before. I helped him out a few times with it that day and I just remember him being really frustrated. Within a couple of months he had succumbed to brain tumors. I miss talking camping, surfing, sports and movies with him. He did some acting himself. He had a thick Jersey accent. R.I.P. Ed, you were one of a kind my friend. Edit. Here he is in a G-Co ad. He's the We Struck Sprinkles guy. https://yao.b/xqfqnr1mce. Now I'm crying. He struck sprinkles. Had a woman that complained about headaches. Her daughter also worked for the company. She went and got it checked out, but the doctors dismissed it. She died of a brain aneurysm. I went to her funeral. That's how my dad died. They told him it was probably migraines or allergies. A week later he collapsed. I used to work with a sweet old Scottish lady. Everyone loved her, and she was a genuine person who was kind and loving. One day on a Friday she said she had an announcement to make. We thought she was going to quit and retire, but she told us she has cancer and she's got around a year to live. Almost everyone started crying. After she quit we would meet her on a monthly basis, and every time she would be thinner, which was sad to see. What really got me was the fact every time we see her it'll be indoors, and her husband would always be wearing sunglasses. I always wondered why. It was apparently from all the crying, and he didn't anyone to see his eyes. Unfortunately she ended up passing later that year. F***cancer. F***cancer. Worked at a Staples in FL once. I was stocking and my manager came up to me and said, "Is no longer with us," which I responded with, "Oh, she quit. Did she give a reason?" Turns out he meant it literally. Apparently she had gotten involved with some bad dudes, and one of them pushed her off a bridge. That was surreal to hear. Vertical bar. Public defender I knew. Had been practicing for 25 years or so. Completely devoted to the cause. Was walking to court one day, had a massive heart attack right before he got to the steps, pronounced over at the hospital. A gymnastics instructor at my gym failed a flip. He was trying off a trampoline and landed on a hard surface on the top of his head. His spinal cord essentially went into his brain. I actually was the one who attempted CPR to resuscitate him, but we later learned he was dead on impact. His pulse was just his body on autopilot after the fact. That reminds me of the video of Indian guys playing a strange sport that was like a hybrid of rugby and wrestling. Guy got dog piled on with his head tucked down by his chest, and you could hear the pop of his spinal cord detaching. Instant lights out. I worked in a hotel restaurant and the overpass chef killed himself after work one night. He was 25 I think, so needless to say it was a big deal. This was also a long time before people started caring about mental health, so it was sad and weird. It's not out of the norm to wonder how many people walk amongst us with suicidal tendencies. Huge coincidence, but my friend's co-worker just died today after being on life support for 2 days. It was a workplace accident. They were moving a boiler at work and the guy said he felt like he was about to pass out. He then fell and hit his head while the others kept holding the boiler so it wouldn't crush the guy's legs. The ambulance got there around 5 minutes later and rushed him to the hospital. Apparently his brain didn't get oxygen for 10 minutes, so he was brain dead. Today then took him off life support. Oh shoot. That sucks. In the end, trying to save his legs, sacrificed the chance of CPR to save his brain. My grandmother worked at a furniture factory where she and many of the other ladies died of cancer due to one of the chemicals they used. That's so awful. I'm so sorry to hear that. It's terrible when some companies don't adequately protect their employees by giving them the protection they need and learn from their mistakes. My wife worked at a factory where a guy disabled the safety interlocks, very common practice, unfortunately, and was inside the hydraulic press when some idiot manager came along, saw that the machine wasn't running, and hit cycle start without bothering to ask why it was off or where the operator was. I hope he got charged for manslaughter. Safety guy walked off the 3rd floor of a building. Same job and electrician fried himself. Know a friend who had a young man die under a falling scissor lift on one job. Know another buddy who had a guy fall off a building and split his head wide open. I actually know the feeling. Luckily it wasn't as far to the ground. Still had a dinner plate sized bruise. That first step is doozy. There's a surprising amount of suicide in tech. I've known 2 people in jobs over the years that took their own life. One I knew very well, my trainer at a legacy e-commerce company. Happiest guy you could ever meet. Very smart, quick-witted. I knew the second guy mainly through ML at a large enterprise. I didn't know him well, I'd just seen him in the hall or the cafeteria a few times. I remember being unreasonably angry that he killed himself, and I can't remember why. I vaguely recall he had a picture of his kid at his desk, which might be part of it. Most people have a flick switch when alone and in public. They can be outgoing, intelligent, witty, quick with retorts, deep depth in public. But you never know how their internal demons may take over alone at home. Our CEO died of cancer in his 50s. Made me think about how despite getting paid millions, that couldn't save him. And he spent so much time working. To think that an old coworker told me what's the point of making money if you can't enjoy it. And the other was getting old is a privilege. Probably the closest one to me was a guy in his late 40s or early 50s that was very athletic, wasn't feeling well one day on a weekend, sat down in a chair, and died, of a pulmonary embolism. It was definitely a strange thing to get to work Monday and not see him there. That same thing happened to a housemate of mine, young, fit, healthy early 20s. He was playing cricket, standing in the outfield doing not very much, and then he was dead. Pulmonary embolism. During my first deployment to Iraq, I was given an assignment to attend funerals. It can be difficult for funerals to be attended in a combat theater, and we had the manpower to spare for someone to be there. I don't know all of the circumstances, I don't recall all the names, and I can never adequately express to anyone who has never served and attended a military funeral how painful it is. My family doesn't understand why I refuse to go to funerals. That last roll call is brutal. We had a female soldier return to the battalion because she volunteered to stay behind for a few months to set up a unit that just got in theater. She was home for like a week, then asked her husband where he put her handgun. He gave it to her not knowing her plan. She killed herself and left him with 2 little kids. After 2 tours myself I came close. I even bought the gun to do it with. I'm glad I didn't. I had a coworker who worked at Walmart. Name was Carol. He was always happy, loved his job, helped me out with things I couldn't reach, helped me buy a BB gun once. He had a heart attack at work, went to the hospital, told he needed a heart transplant, couldn't afford it, and decided to just live out the rest of his days. He went back to work at Walmart. One day he died at home. Another heart attack, getting ready for work. He died in his Walmart uniform. That will always F*** with me. I never want to hear how wonderful Walmart is to their workers. I'm in heavy construction. You don't want to hear my stories. I want to hear your stories, but I don't want you to have to remember them. Several months ago I had a female colleague aged 30 that passed away completely unexpectedly from an underlying medical condition that was only discovered after her death. Literally here on a Thursday and joking around with everyone, and then Friday she was gone. For as tragic and shocking as it was, it really did wake me up to how fragile and finite life is, and you never know when your time is up. I use the wake up call to set some big goals for myself, and have been definitely living a more active / fuller life, and feel more gratitude for each day. When I was in the army there was this super awesome guy in the infantry. Nicest guy, tough as hell, really good soldier material. He was learning how to scuba dive in his free time, and his regulator got snagged in something, and he must have panicked, and held his breath on the way up, because he was so new at it, and his lungs burst. R.I.P. soldier. I was the manager. Hoop-de-doo. My new hire called, and left me a message saying, "Hey, sorry boss. I must be tired. I woke up in my truck on my way to work. I'll be right in. Sorry etc." Then there was another message from his GF, screaming and crying, scared. He had a brain aneurysm, it must have passed, and he woke up, but then it got stuck somewhere else I guess. The most fucked part was, while he was dying, he was trying to get to work. Awful memory. Why do you use so many periods? I'm a trucker. It's pretty up there for most dangerous job in the US. Lots of crashes kill drivers, rollovers mostly. Lost 2 friends to COVID. The poor lifestyle trucking gives you doesn't lead to the best outcomes, even for mild cases. Sadly all the stories wouldn't be mine, they would be my stepdad's. 30 years in trucking has given him a very morbid and strong sense of humor, and plenty of horrible stories. The only one that's mine, I remember once as I rode in the cab beside him, we passed a tractor crammed all the way to the sleeper up the rear of a 40-foot reefer and he grabbed the CB and hollered, "Damn, that was one fine butt fuck. Did anybody bite it? Holler back if you ain't flat." Not me but my mother. A guy she worked with just didn't turn up one day. Turns out he had a heart attack while driving on the highway to work. Ended up in a hard to see spot in winter, just as we were having heavy snow. I took 3 days or so to find him. Forget the rest of the circumstances, but I'm pretty sure he lives alone and was at least 50. This happened almost a decade ago. I was a co-op, and one of the engineers was a young guy probably late 30s early 40s, went out for a run over the weekend and had an aneurysm. It was so sad when we found out that week. R.I.P. Chuck. I had already moved to another job, was military so not by choice. My former boss and her family went on vacation in Alaska with other families. Her husband and another couple took the RV to go to the store or something, leaving their kids with a friend couple at the campsite. Apparently the RV slid off the road, down a cliff through the trees. The RV was shredded to pieces and everybody died. Kids thankfully were safe at the campsite, but that vacation made them orphans. I worked at the steelworks for several years. A middle-aged guy, extremely experienced, was operating around extremely high-pressure air lines. These lines were tested and checked regularly for damage. One day, it was purely a freak accident. External investigation found no fault. The line snapped, and he got final destination straight across the midsection. Are you saying he was cut in half?